called it the last card because he said this is all a giant game and it's a dangerous game. And I think everyone listening today knows that.
So are we ready for the next one? So this next Russian speaker, maybe later today, if we can get Timofey online, we'll pivot back to him, but we'll just roll with these. People can be flexible. What happens with live things out of Russia to here?
This is Professor Alexander Semyonov. All of these people are also scientists, economic experts. They're all experts from the ecology of the unknown.
Элементарное. Просто мы не зная еще каких-то физических глубинных законов, которые они освоили, там перемещаются по этим законам, там исчезают из видимости в невидимость там, и так далее. Мы не знаем еще этих полей, мы не знаем этих вибраций, мы не знаем частот, спектров, мы этого просто не знаем. И поэтому ведем себя вот неправильно, когда, допустим, приближаемся к НЛО, или когда какой-нибудь самолет догоняет там НЛО. Ну, это не является актом агрессии. Еще проще. Над американской базой завис НЛО. Это что, агрессия? Где здесь немирные, враждебные какие-то действия? Это просто любопытство, это контроль. И, кстати говоря, контроль в ряде случаев очень эффективный и, слава богу, правильный. Итак, я призываю всех людей доброй воли, которые хотят просто жить на этой планете, присоединить свой голос к требованию от правительства заключить такие договора, которые не позволяли выводить в космос никакое оружие. Раз. И во-вторых, понимать, что вот в июне месяце, может быть, начаться разыгрывание вот этой вот последней так называемой карты, которая может привести к гибели или к страданиям подавляющего большинства людей. Мы не должны этого допустить. Мы не должны рассматривать представителей иных миров, цивилизаций, как враждебных. Мы должны сами измениться. К этому нас призывали все религии, к этому нас призывали выдающиеся наши соотечественники, Вернадский, Флоренский, Чижевский, Казначеев, Циолковский и многие другие мыслители не только в России, но и за ее пределами. Будем жить. Спасибо.
Now, this is a man that we had trouble even getting on, another general.
Very important, yeah.
Yeah. He did commit to doing this. This was a speech I think he gave in 2016
Под Харьковом
in America. No.
был арсенал боеприпасов и ракет, где содержалось ядерные боеприпасы. В феврале 1979 года прилетел летающий тарелка. Часовой, который стоял на вышке, попал в ступор, но успел нажать сигнал. Приехала пожарная команда, которая тоже не дошла до зоны, где остановилась летающая тарелка. Как описывали эти люди, все было зарегистрировано, зафиксировано, зарисовано. Значит, из НЛО вышли 3 представителя ростом 3,2, 3,5 метра, в белых костюмах, с чемоданчиком прошли к хранилищу, где размещались ядерные заряды. Чем было вызвано? Температура на одном ядерном заряде была на 2-3 градуса выше, чем положено. А вы знаете, стабильность ядерного заряда – это главное, безопасность и все остальное. Через час они улетели, все зашевелились, ступор прошел, начали фотографировать. Так след одного из этих представителей был длиной 57 сантиметров. Теперь понимаете, это не просто рост, да, это и такая основная как бы характеристика этих дел, да. Арсенал Каргат, Новосибирская область. вот этот волосатый представитель потустороннего мира заходит в караульное помещение, смена караульная, вся замирает, наливает себе воды из бачка, выпил и ушел. Все к окну смотрели, он повернулся, помахал и тут же пропал. Вот мы всегда говорим, откуда они берутся. Ну, я думаю, что скоро мы поймем, что есть понятие свернутого времени, параллельные миры и все остальное. Но надо думать, что приписывать обезьяне те возможности, которым он обладает, а в принципе после этого события мы стали рассчитывать на то, что они обладают телепатией, психофизическим воздействием и управлением сознанием. Конечно, никакая обезьяна этим не обладает.
This has been going on since 1945, and you'll hear Paula Harris talk about this as well in a case that is more significant than Roswell from 1945. So this is a theme, a motif that runs over the last 75 plus years since the dawn of the atomic and nuclear age. And that is, these civilizations are very concerned because when we went to that level of technology, we ended up not only damaging the Earth and our species and all species on Earth with radiation and plutonium that causes cancers and mutations and what have you, but also it tears through the fabric of space-time transdimensionally and may in fact be doing greater damage in those worlds. This is a key point everyone listening must understand. That is why we humans, since the mid-40s, are viewed as a huge problem in the cosmos, and why Eisenhower was approached by a group of extraterrestrials saying, please stop this process, make peace, and join an interplanetary family and live in peace on this planet. Because it was not only about the survival of the human species, it's also that when we do these things, we don't realize in quantum physics, in the entangled universe, the degree to which what Einstein called the spooky effect, where the same particle could be in two places at once, et cetera, and so on, that the cosmos isn't this straight line linear existence. It's a quantum conscious hologram woven together. And when we do something of a critical mass of, say, Hiroshima or what have you, and the things we have now, these weapons now that he's referring to are orders of magnitude more destructive than ones we dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. It actually creates damage, not just on Earth, but throughout the cosmos. And now you're understanding why the ETs are here. One of the reasons they're here is that they're very concerned about what we do to this beautiful world by a small group of sociopaths and warmongers, but what it's doing to their worlds. So we have to understand that.
And
So-
this is why
So
these
the
people
next-
are coming forward. But
Oh, is he on?
now,
Is Timothy on?
this is Timofey. Timofey is the trainer of cosmonauts and astronauts from all over the world. They go to him to be trained to go into space. He's amazing. He's also a musician. He's got little children. He lives in a dome house community. And he is going to tell us now, he's going to give a 45 minutes. I don't know what he's going to say. No?
Unfortunately, we're at the point now where we have to take a break at 2:50. So Timothy, I'm sorry, but we kind of had to extend things because we couldn't get you in. So we have about 33 minutes.
You can do it.
If you can sort of go through things, the really critical things, and I really appreciate that. I'm sorry we've had these technical difficulties, but so we have about 33 minutes.
We blame it on the Russians. We blame everything on the
Okay.
Russians. But it's okay, Timothy.
So
Go ahead.
thank you, Timothy, and it's very good to see you here. And
So I have-
I really welcome your involvement, and this is a very courageous guy that I've gotten to know through Zoom in the last few months, and the work he's doing is really important for the world, and I want to thank you. So go ahead, Timothy. You have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Greer. Hello, everyone who's watching us. Hello, Dr. Greer and all people in the house. My name is Timofey Egorov. I am the trainer of cosmonauts at the Gagarin Cosmonauts Training Center, Star City, Russia. Also, I am the general director of the association Ecology of the Unknown, which is a non-governmental organization, the largest one and the most recognized official organization in Russia, dealing with the unknown phenomena of nature, cosmos, and human abilities. UFOs in that number, of course. Now I'm going to briefly tell you about the association so you can understand where it all comes from. The association Ecology of the Unknown was established to unite efforts and coordinate actions of individuals and legal entities that conduct scientific research contributing to the evolution of mankind in the field of studying of the unknown phenomena of nature, cosmos, and human abilities, in order to further take them into account and deploy them in practical work, including in preparation to the adoption of important state and international decisions. So that's what we need to understand. Now I'm going to present and talk about a few cases that our experts were dealing with, the most famous UFO sightings in Russia. And please know that we have a lot of people that we're working with, among them military men, PhD candidates, a lot of different experts in different fields. And we have some connections in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russian Federation and other significant organizations in Russia whose employees are also part of our team. So today I'm speaking on behalf of all these people. And now I'm going to present you something. So will you please show the picture on case 1? Okay, so can you see it, the hole? Oh yes, now I can see it. This is the Petrozavodsk phenomenon. It was 1977. A large, bright, jellyfish-like object appeared in the sky of Petrozavodsk, Russia, in Karelia. It was also simultaneously seen in a number of other cities of Russia and Finland. The phenomenon was observed by a large number of eyewitnesses. Some made sketches, some saw it through a telescope, some took pictures of it. The object burned holes in the windows of the houses of Petrozavodsk with the jets coming out of it. As you can see, the jets are coming out of it. But not a single living being was harmed. So this is another picture. And now please show the burned holes in the windows. Yes. Next one. Next one. Next one. As you see, the holes are burned through. The glass didn't fall apart. Next one. Next. These are some articles from Russian newspapers back in the day in 1977. Reports about the phenomenon with pictures were published both in the local and in central press, which gave the Soviet public a reason to study the unexplained phenomena. Even Brezhnev was also read into this. Initially, the phenomenon was explained as a natural phenomenon, but later they begin to tell that it appeared as the result of the launch of a satellite and an unsuccessful launch of a ballistic missile conducted nearby at about the same time. But one of our experts General Sitnov, the video of which you have been just watching before I connected, who was later the armaments chief of the USSR and was officially in charge of collecting the UFO data, told us that he received reports that the object was 300 meters in diameter and was moving like this from north to south of Russia. As you know, Russia is a big country, in no time. And they saw the object on radars. So that's definitely not something of this world. Okay, let's go to case number 2. The January 29, 1986, near the village of Dalnegorsk in Russia, a UFO was observed in the form of a bright, self-luminous ball. It crashed in the mountains. So this is a sketch of what eyewitnesses saw. There's no actual photo of this event, but at the crash site, some objects were retrieved. Here they are. Let me talk about them a little bit. The objects were examined in the laboratory by chemists and other experts. Instances of iron balls had a very high degree of hardness. They could not be cut with steel tools, and they could only be cut with a diamond. According to experts, the composition of the balls included almost the entire periodic table. And here at the right, you can see a little mesh. This is a very curious mesh. In one of the samples of the mesh, they found fragments of the thinnest 17 microns threads, which in turn consisted of even thinner fibers twisted into bundles. Those appeared to be very thin golden wires. Experts conclude that such a technology is impossible even at the current level of technology development. And what is interesting about this, they've put a monument like this, and many people came to this place to visit and to examine it as well. Okay, let's go to case number 3. This is a table which is put there. It said that on January 29, 1986, a UFO crashed here. Dvozhilny Valery Viktorovich, an eminent Russian ufologist, was the first to examine the crash site. That's what is written here in Russian. The case number 3 was a landing of a flying saucer, and there were 3 boys playing at the place, which were separately debriefed, and their testimonies matched. So that's the drawings that an artist draw according to their testimonies. This is the object that they saw. These are 3 extraterrestrials that came out of the vehicle and communicated with them. Again, no one was harmed, but after that event, Voronezh, the city where it took place, became very famous, and there were people from different countries which even made some documentaries on this event. Okay, let's go to case number 4. Here's the boy, the witness. Okay, another photo. Okay, this is the landing site. Here's a video that took our Russian cosmonaut Ivan Wagner in 2020. He was filming Northern Lights over Antarctica. So watch somewhere in the middle of the screen to the left, you will see 5 objects in a row. Saw this? Okay, and there will be another piece. Let's watch on. This is the Northern Lights. It's a zoom in. You see one object flying, and at the top of the screen and in the middle, you'll see 5 objects. They're going in a row. And there will be 2 more. This is, again, the same. And there will be 2 more. Right here. Following those 5. 2 more. And 1 more. So he reported this to the chief of Roscosmos, but no comments followed still. Okay, after we have briefly viewed these 4 cases of, as Dr. Greer uses to say, evidence, I'd like you to watch, to take one step higher and watch the video of one of our best expert. He's the president of the Association Ecology of the Unknown. And he will talk about what we can do with this evidence depending on our level of morality and ethics. It depends on you. Let's view the video. Let's watch it.
Hello, my friends. Please excuse me, but to save time, I will read the text. Every word in it has its meaning. I am Alexander Semyonov, president of the Association Ecology of the Unknown, which has been operating for more than 30 years. I am also a professor and a presidium member of the Academy of Geopolitical Problems. For 45 years, I have been in the field of studying of the so-called anomalous phenomena, including the UFO phenomenon. I personally know almost all scientists and specialists and researchers who created the foundations of Russian ufology and have made their contribution to the ufology worldwide. For about 15 years, while working in the group of the Soviet pioneer of ufology, Felix Yurievich Zigel, I, just like the most researchers, believed that the more observational data about UFOs is there, and the more reliable the witnesses of their appearance are, the sooner the state authorities will stop covering up and classifying information about them. The faster the full-scale scientific study of the phenomenon will begin, and the media will stop relegating its study to the level of simple curiosity. And that's when we will finally know the nature of the UFO phenomenon, probably related to its extraterrestrial origin. I, as well as numerous Russian and foreign researchers, hoped that the official scientific recognition of UFOs will encourage the advancement of humanity into the universe, will facilitate contact with the brothers in consciousness, as well as it will expand our knowledge of the world. But that didn't happen. Moreover, the official scientific world resolutely distanced itself from the consideration of the problem, marking it as pseudo-scientific. State structures have taken a vow of silence, and the media continued to cover the problem in a superficial, vulgar way. And this is despite the fact that over decades, hundreds of serious informal associations in many countries of the world gathered a raise of thousands, hundreds of thousands of cases of UFO sightings. In addition, they periodically began to feed the public with declassified, though smeared, archives of UFO sightings, the collection of which has long been conducted in a closed mode by some government agencies in a number of countries. However, the methods of mathematical statistics, correlative and regression analyses more than 30 years ago allowed to identify several features of the UFO phenomenon that objectively talk about a set of properties inherent only to it, the same for different regions of the world. However, based on all the accumulated archives and investigations conducted, it is still impossible to say anything unambiguously certain about the nature of UFOs in scientific terms, except for one thing: the phenomenon objectively exists. The question is not about the reality of the existence and presence of the UFO phenomenon on Earth. It's about how we, humanity, should respond to it correctly. UFOs are associated with the activities of extraterrestrial civilizations. This is the most obvious version. Clarifying considerations is not so important right now. Whether UFOs are messengers from other planets or from other space-time dimensions, other worlds, frequencies, it doesn't matter. It seems that it would be more correct now to refer to them as the otherworlders. From the UFO archives, it follows that there are several otherworld civilizations. The description of the type and properties of their representatives has essentially a literary tone to it. But it is important that these descriptions, based on the so-called contact stories, have one thing in common. Among the otherworlders, there is no one who would relate to us in a hostile or aggressive manner. There are descriptions of an indifferent attitude to people. There is neutral, there is good attitude, but there is no hostile or aggressive one. And for all the time of communication with the otherworlders, of the most different contactees, there were no cases of presentation to Earth civilization of any ultimatum requirements, terms. Not a single bit of hostility or aggressiveness was shown by the otherworlders. There is also no recorded case of intentional, purposeful infliction of harm to people by otherworlders. Cases of UFO impact on the equipment took place most often as a response to the actions of people. In 1977, the 33rd UN General Assembly considered Ecofon Memorandum on these impacts. But in the future, with an objective study of such cases, it became clear that the injured witnesses, often military, unknowingly found themselves in the zones of action of force and other fields inherent in UFOs, and unwittingly violated the unknown to Earthlings safety rules for contacts with UFOs. UFOs have not provoked a single military conflict. Their presence near military or secret facilities has the nature of supervision, but does not indicate in any way that their intentions are dangerous for personnel and equipment. There were cases when namely the presence of UFOs in the areas of basing of strategic strike systems zeroed out the probability of combat launches of nuclear missiles. We should also not forget that any peculiarities of the behavior of other subjects, for example animals, we humans perceive only through the prism of our own established views, beliefs and inclinations, including those of aggressiveness, hostility, evil, good, fear, etc. There is no reason to believe that UFOs and representatives of extraterrestrial civilizations are hostile or aggressive in relation to the Earthlings. Manifestations of the UFO phenomenon are exclusively peaceful in nature. So here we are. The UFO phenomenon that was not taken seriously for 70 years, that has not become an important subject of study of the world science, the phenomenon which they abused for filming thrillers about bad aliens, now turned out to be in demand, moreover, at the official level of US Congress. It can be employed when playing, according to the expression of Werner von Braun, of the last card, that is, for implementation of the fourth stage of coming to the New World Order. According to the major spending bill signed by the President of the United States on December 27, 2020, the Minister of Defense and the Director of National Intelligence have to report until June 2021 to the Committees of Congress on Intelligence and Armed Forces what their agencies know about UFOs. The Pentagon must provide a report on unidentified aerial objects and phenomena, which should contain a detailed analysis of UFO data collected by the Department of Navy Intelligence, by the Task Force on Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, and the FBI. The Pentagon must identify any potential threats to national security emanating from UFOs and assess whether China or Russia could be behind such activities. The report must be public, but it may contain secret data. Such formulation of the President's instructions makes the following steps possible. US military and intelligence services confirm the presence of a whole spectrum of identified potential threats from UFOs. After all, for many decades, taxpayers' money from the US budget was spent to finance the ongoing, unacknowledged special access projects. World mass media starts a massive brainwashing of the population of the planet. A simulation of an alien invasion takes place. UFOs are declared enemies of humanity. US military-industrial complex receives contracts for the development and production of new weapon systems to compensate for UFO threats. Allies countries join the US defense program, providing their financial, technical, military, territorial resources, raw materials, political and other resources. Russia, China and other non-aligned countries are declared traitors to humanity. Against them, strict political, economic, informational, military, space and other sanctions are introduced. A global operational headquarters is created for the reflection of UFO threats. A sole commander of the planet is elected. The role of the UN is being reviewed and virtually reset. The authority is exercised by the managers of the deep state. For serving the elite, a moderately well-fed computer concentration camp is created out of the population. The launch of weapon systems into space begins. Activities of the most nations of the planet are controlled under the threat of the use of weapons from outer space. The probability of a global military conflict reaches its limit. What does the UFO phenomenon have to do with all this? Absolutely nothing. They just needed a convenient excuse. And now, the most important thing. In the Soviet Union, there has been started and then continued and modernized the methodology for making contact with representatives of, let's say, supreme intelligent powers of the cosmos. The task was set to achieve bilateral, meaningful communication with them. The goal was not to get some momentary situational hints or new technologies, but to gain knowledge of the cornerstones, fundamental laws of the universe, about the main principles on which the cosmos is built. The ideological and scientific basis for setting this goal were the researches of the great thinkers, Russian cosmists of the 19th and 20th centuries, such as Berdyaev, Tsiolkovsky, Vernadsky, Chizhevsky, Kozyrev, Kazanachev, and others. The goal was achieved. Among the many topics raised during this communication was the question of the possibility of putting into the space environment of a so familiar to Earthlings attribute, like weapons. The answer was immediate. It was strict, absolutely unambiguous, not allowing any double interpretations. It is unacceptable to bring any weapons into space. That both Soviet and Russian leadership has been consistent for decades, back in the day and now, firmly defending the principles of exclusively peaceful exploration of outer space. Peaceful people of planet Earth. There are significantly more of us than a handful of those who want to establish a cosmic dictatorship on Earth. Be vigilant. Demand an absolute ban of the placement of weapons in outer space. Thank you.
Hey, Timofey, so if you want to say a few more things.
Yes, I have 4 minutes more, so I'm going to say something more. Okay? Okay, so after all that has just been said by Alexander Semyonov, I want together with you to look into the future and see what we, the people, can do. So there are three options. One, how the situation can develop. One, an extraterrestrial ship lands on the lawn of the White House. The ambassadors of the other world come out of their ship, and the people get a proposal from them to initiate and maintain a peaceful contact. So this is very unlikely to happen because extraterrestrials know, see, and understand that humanity has an extremely low level of morality, of ethics, and such an event can cause an inappropriate reaction of people. Second, the initiative group that promotes the idea of exclusively peaceful exploration of space, that's being us, manages to reach out to the leaders of their states, officials in high positions, so in other words, decision makers. This outcome is still more likely than the described in paragraph 1. But as you may well know, such people who are in high positions and have access to big money and big power are often more, have more, let's say, various human vices, and they have they are highly unlikely that they are going to change fast, and we need it fast. And the third option is that we, peaceful inhabitants of the earth, willing and ready to change for the better, unite our desires, our efforts and aspirations in an international social movement, the goals and objectives of which are simple and understandable to every person on earth. And we in Russia have already started such a social movement. We named it the ethics of the cosmos, because ethics is a set of universal laws which one have to follow to be able to evolve and travel throughout the universe. That is, by the way, the reason why there are no hostile extraterrestrials, because you have to have a certain level of ethics before you will learn the transdimensional physics and you can travel to other worlds. Otherwise, you can bring harm to people. So, and we invite everyone to join this movement. We can discuss the details. If you're willing to do this, if you want to have more information, you can check our website. And before I finish, I would like to show you one more last picture of my presentation, which I personally call the hardest evidence of the fact that we are not alone in the universe. The picture is named Hubble Legacy Field. Okay, what you see here in this picture is what the Hubble telescope sees on a tiny piece of the sky, about a moon size if you look from the surface of the Earth. By the way, these are not stars. These are galaxies. 265,000 of them in this little piece of the sky, each containing billions of stars, each star possibly having a planetary system very much like our solar system, where life could emerge just like on our planet here under the sun. And you can also see this picture in detail at the Hubble website. But someday you just go under the stars, raise your head up, see the magnificent, beautiful, and living universe. And don't you tell me that you feel alone, because we're not alone. There are many other civilizations out there, and they're waiting for us to join them in peace. So people of the world, let's put ourselves together, change this world for the better, and enter this bright future this new world that together we can take.
Thank you. I
Thank you.
really appreciate it. Thank you, Timofey. And I know it's very late in Moscow. On behalf of all of us and the 20th anniversary of the Disclosure Project, I want to please extend a thank you to all those who made videos for us and how much we appreciate their coming forward. It takes a lot of courage for these sorts of generals and other people to say what they have said, and we honor their courage. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
as
you,
well,
Timothy.
Dr. Greer. Hello, Carol.
Hello, Timofey.
So if we want to have like one more minute, if you want to wrap up, and then we're going to show a little.
It's 3 o'clock in the morning for them.
We're going to show a little video that's a sort of a celebratory video of our 20 years, but just in 1 moment, because we're running.
Just real quickly, I'm sorry we didn't get to see all of the videos, but we will post them on peaceandspace.com. Again, go down the introduction and you will see Timofey's website link. He also is chairing the Ethics of the Cosmos project that we can all join in with and you can learn from, because they're going to be providing a lot of information. Again, there's 700 videos or so that you posted on that website about the Ziegel's readings, a lot of these speakers. We didn't get to see Valentina, but you'll see her. She's a psychoanalyst, a psychologist who chairs that Center for Transdimensional of consciousness, the transformation of consciousness. Very important. And she was taken into the woods as part of an 8-people selection from the government to meet 2 extraterrestrial beings. So she is on the website now. You'll see her. And sorry, we didn't get to see her in person right now on the video. But these are amazing people. As Stephen said, they're so courageous, just like you, because you're going to be going out with the ethics of the cosmos kind of conversation now. You see the Russian position. You just heard it from Professor Semyonov. Wow. I mean, this is the Russian position now. They're calling for the treaty to prevent the placement of weapons in outer space. Read it. You'll learn about that too. And please go out and promote it. So thank you all for being participants in all of this and what you're about to do. Go for it.
Thank you. So we are going to do just a really quick little celebratory video that Michael put together, and then we're going to take a 20-minute break. Okay? Thank you. We are here today. We are here.
And we have witnesses here today that have shown you that these extraterrestrial beings, that these craft that have come here are now not UFOs, they're identified flying objects. And we know that they have beings in them. And we have witnesses here who have told you that they can shut down our missile silos. They can stop a rocket going into space that's a test. We have witnesses here who have worked in the classified departments who have the courage to come forward here.
They actually photographed the UFO following the missile as it climbed into space and shining a beam on it, which neutralized the missile.
If you accept the multidimensional theory, it's highly likely that we've done a hell of a lot of damage. In somebody else's world, they might have even done more damage there than we did here.
There is no evidence, I wish to emphasize, that these life forms from elsewhere are hostile towards us. But there is a great deal of evidence that they are concerned with our hostility.
An alien had come off the craft and had been shot by a military policeman and apparently was wounded and was heading for McGuire.
when I got out in 1989, we had cataloged 57 different species. You have individuals that look very much like you and myself that could walk among us and you wouldn't even notice the difference. The entities that we did catalog were in fact humanoid. Now this created a situation where the scientific community was trying to figure out why that would be the case, because you would expect that if life evolved on other planets, that they would take on some type of other being, so to speak, not necessarily look humanoid or be bipedal such as we are. But apparently we got quite a few of the species out there that are humanoid in appearance, and that creates a question that yet has to be answered by science.
These discs were hovering off the floor without any visible means of support. They were referred to as alien reproduction vehicles, also nicknamed the flux liner because they used high voltage electricity.
We're back. Okay, welcome everyone. And again, all the thousands of people who are online watching, I hope you enjoyed that. I'm sorry we were running a little bit late, had some technical difficulties, but in the scheme of things, it's all right. And I just want to give you a little overview. I'm going to spend about an hour or so dealing with some really key important information, particularly the aircraft that are man-made that have been posing as UFOs, the information that we have on a new photograph of some type of humanoid being dissected in the 1920s. We're going to go through that in this next hour. I'm going to be going through, of course, the very well-known case of where Ben Rich wrote to a friend what his assessment of this issue was and confirmed that they were both man-made and extraterrestrial. But I think what I want to start off with is more recent. So I've shared in pieces here and there what we were doing towards the end of the last administration for President Trump and Vice President Pence. I was not able to reach anyone in that administration at the level of the office of the president or vice president, unfortunately, reliably until September of 2020. So kind of late to the party. At that point, I had the CEO of a think tank and consultancy in Washington, D.C., A10 Associates, who the CEO of which is very close friends with the Pence family and knew the Trump family, who 100% supportive of what we were trying to do to avoid World War III and endless war, and particularly weaponizing space and portraying these interstellar visitors as a national security threat. But unfortunately, we're a little late to the party. And by the time Unacknowledged had hundreds of millions of views, and this counterintelligence and disinformation operation known as To the Stars Academy, TTSA, went public with the Tic Tac and other videos. Unfortunately, at that point, we knew that there was a countermeasure to what Unacknowledged was telling the public. Because when you hit hundreds of millions of people, it goes viral, then they're going to do something. So the genesis of that, we knew, was the beginning of them launching what Wernher von Braun warned about, the hoaxing of an alien threat where they could unite the world around a militaristic response to this. And at that point, I realized, we're really in trouble. And we're going to have to do something to sort of get the narrative back. The first thing we did was to create, through the help of many of you, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, which also became a #1 documentary on Amazon and iTunes and all over the world. And it's now on Amazon Prime. Anyone can see it for free if they have Prime, and on other sites. That was a call to action for grassroots what Timofey Egorov, the trainer of cosmonauts in Russia, just said, where we come together as a movement that are grassroots, where we make peaceful contact with these civilizations and bypass the national security state and take the matter into the hands of we the people, which is how it actually should be. And so that, of course, went forward. And about the time that course picked up enormous momentum in the last 12 months, they then pivot towards this big problem with the Trump administration having been targeted at the level of the president and the vice president with very effective counterintelligence disinformation. Now, let me explain how this works. Probably you all know about the Iraq War and how we, through the Vice President Cheney's office, cherry-picked intelligence so that Colin Powell, the Secretary of State, would go to the UN and talk about the fearsome weapons of mass destruction that Saddam Hussein had. Now, you know, I'm no fan of Saddam Hussein. He was obviously a thug and a dictator, and they're all over the world. However, he did not have those weapons, and it was known he did not have them. However, it was enough to stampede the American people and the Congress into a disastrous war. And it was all based on knowingly false and hoaxed, in some cases, intelligence. Colin Powell, the Secretary of State, who had been chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, by the way, it wasn't like he wasn't familiar with military and intelligence operations, admitted later that he was deceived, and his chief of staff went on the record saying that they were deceived by an intelligence operation out of the West Wing run by the Vice President Cheney. Of course, that ship sailed a while back. I'll get into some things that happened there that will stun you. And with weapon electronic systems on satellites. But when we get into looking at how this runs, you also have to go all the way back to the era of Ronald Reagan. And I met with a colonel not long ago, before he passed away, named Colonel Holman. And Colonel Holman had been on a committee back in the Carter transition, late Carter years and early Ronald Reagan presidency, to convince the president of the need for the Strategic Defense Initiative, Star Wars. And it wasn't really getting much traction as a policy initiative in terms of conventional geopolitical exigencies and requirements until they played the last card. And he admitted to me that they went in with cherry-picked and distorted information and convinced Ronald Reagan that there was an alien threat. And of course, that's reflected in his speech to the United Nations and a few other speeches where the president said, oh, wouldn't our job of uniting the world be easier if we could unite against a common threat, alien threat? So unfortunately, you know, you had an actor from Hollywood and then a governor of California, Ronald Reagan, who was easy to move through cherry picking and spinning of information to go to the policy decision these classified projects wanted. This happens all the time in the Congress, in the White House, and in other capitals, because the people who run these unacknowledged special access projects, first and foremost, are masters of psychological warfare, psyops, and psychological and social engineering. Very good at it, extremely good at it. It's why the CIA director in 1953, CIA Director Smith, says, and we have the document, it's in my books, and it says that the UFO matter has a great potential for psychological warfare operations. Well, that's what it was talking about. And so that was something that was actually put into play in the early 50s, and perhaps in some milder way before that, in the 40s. But it definitely began at that point. So we have to understand that our democracy, which Eisenhower warned, was vulnerable to these kinds of machinations and extreme secrecy, that it could threaten our security and our peace. That's what Eisenhower said on his last speech to the world before he left office and before Jack Kennedy became president. And what I've learned is people who are in positions with access to the presidency often are the people moved into place to be able to do exactly that. The gentleman whose letter I quoted from at the opening, who set up my meeting with the director of the CIA in 1993, flat out, when I asked him, is it possible that the director of the CIA really hasn't been read into this or briefed on it? No. I said, well, what about the president? He says, well, the president has just been brushed off. And I said, how is that even possible? This is my naive days as a young doctor stepping into that world. I've never been in the government and don't want to be. But he said, oh yeah, I was a staffer on Ronald Reagan's National Security Council. And if we didn't want the old man to know, we just lied to him. I said, you lied to the president of the United States. He said, oh yeah, every day, all the time. Welcome to Washington. So you have to get into a mindset of understanding how this is played. Your civics lesson and the naivete of what's presented on the mainstream media, what you've read in your history books and all this, throw it away. And that's just a PR stunt. It's not how this country's been running since World War II. So I don't say that with any pride. My mother's ancestors were the original prisoner of war with the British, interestingly. And my dad was half Cherokee, the native peoples of this land. But when you look at this, you realize that we have a very big constitutional crisis. And so when I was approached by these folks to put a briefing together for the president and the vice president back in the fall, in the summer, I said, I'll do it. And I said, but you have to be our liaison. And it has to be handed to them off-site that does not go through the security system. And they were able to do that because otherwise it's been intercepted, put aside. So that group worked diligently. We're still close and working. Of course, obviously it's irrelevant in terms of that administration, they're out. And we also did about a 20-minute video brief summary that was handed to the vice president and the president, and was also sent actually to Russia as well for President Putin. And what's important about that is that we were trying to get the president to pivot away from the Space Force and the green lighting of weaponization of space, et cetera, and so on. I was horrified. My worst fear when I heard about the formation of the Space Force, and also when this counterintelligence group with Luis Elizondo and Chris Mellon, these other people went public, was that in fact, the train had left the station and that they had effectively pulled the trigger on the ramp up to this false flag operation. And in fact, that's what was confirmed. What was confirmed to me from people very close to the president and vice president is that they had been targeted with virulent, hateful disinformation about the alien threat, and that they were convinced that it was an existential threat to this world. Now, into that disaster, I stepped. Unfortunately, it also was a disaster of this election. So it wasn't easy. This is the original letter they wrote on my behalf to the president, the vice president, and this is the briefing document for President Trump and Vice President Pence. Now, our recommendation, just to be clear, was that they steer away from that narrative, that they do a joint announcement with other world leaders and religious leaders around the world, saying that we're not alone, that they're not hostile, they're concerned about what we're doing in space. We come together and keep all weapons out of space and develop a rapprochement and a diplomatic initiative to make contact peacefully with these civilizations so we can go forward. Obviously, that didn't happen. We were trying to make that happen before January 20th, and of course, it was one catastrophe after another. I was on the phone and up all night, with what happened on January 6th. And we won't go into all the gory detail of that. I mean, it's not important, it's over. But that is what we've been doing. Of course, I've been doing this at a certain level for different places around the world since the early 90s with the Clinton administration forward. This was the scariest situation I've ever seen, because in other presidencies, we knew that they were doing things clandestinely, like Dick Cheney was on this committee of 200 or 300, along with George H.W. Bush Sr., and a number of other folks that I know about and some of whom I met with over the years. But they were sort of moving, they were keeping it sub rosa, underneath. And it was not in the mainstream media in that narrative, and it wasn't coming out of the government officially. That all changed. The beta test, the trial balloon for it, was the TTSA imbroglio, where they were, everything they released. The Tic Tac had, every story in the mainstream media was, and it's a threat to the national security, and it's a national security threat. And they're invading our bases, and they're interfering with our nuclear weapons. Everything was couched in a xenophobic, fear-based manner. And stories like that once were forbidden to be published in the New York Times. This subject was redlined, I'm quoting. I was told this by an editor of the New York Times. We don't cover this stuff. Suddenly, simultaneously, it appears in all the media, mainstream media, both digital, cable news, CNN, Fox News, New York Times, and globally in other media. That's when I knew they had hit the button. They had hit the button go. And their lackeys and the shills in the media who actually work undercover as journalists and editors were ordered to carry this story. Now, they don't carry the Disclosure Project witnesses and videos or documents, which are much more dispositive and much more evidence than what TTSA released. However, they did it that way because the people who were the mouthpieces appearing in the media were all sticking to the talking points, to wit, to be specific, that these are a threat to the national security, and we have to find out what they are. And number two, we don't know what they are. We're going to call them something new, UAPs. And we don't know how they operate or fly. We don't know how they're moving. Never mind, we've been building them since the 1940s and 50s experimentally, and fully operationally since October 1954, and that's what we're going to show you. Now, this charade is very dangerous because in the last month, both the ranking member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Marco Rubio, and the Director of National Intelligence for Trump, Radcliffe, have said the same talking points. We don't know what these are. They're a threat to national security. And even, we don't even know how they're going faster than the speed of sound without making a sonic boom. When, of course, there have been classified aerospace projects and people I know who developed those systems decades ago. Now, if in fact the ranking member of the Senate Intelligence Committee doesn't know that salient fact, and, or heaven forbid, the Director of National Intelligence doesn't, then that's a very big problem. The only problem that's worse is that they do know that that's a lie, and they are scripted and they are lying to the public and to the American people. And it's appalling. It cannot go on. Because the reason they would want people to think, this is what's important, this is the punchline. The reason they want everyone to think, we don't know what those are, or maybe they're from China or Russia, it's nonsense, is because if and when they roll out this last card, this hoaxing of an alien threat, this false flag operation, the whole world will be convinced, oh, we've been told we don't know what these are, therefore anything that goes bump in the night or is violent or something disastrous happens, it's alien. Blame it on the aliens because we don't have that capability. What we are here to do is to prove in point of fact we do. Full stop, end of discussion. Let's quit playing games. Because if the public understands the technologies, the modus operandi, the research and development that has happened since World War II to now, and that we have these systems, and that they have been in the past and will be in the future used for counterintelligence and hoaxing and faking events. Then, if enough people know that, 1 billion, 2 billion people know it, which is our intention with what we're doing today, then they may not pull that stunt. We may avoid that last card from being played. Because if we don't, you've heard what these generals and others have said, what the consequences are. And they are not overstating the gravity of the situation at all, not in the least, and neither is Carol Rosin. So that's what's at stake here. So as we go forward, and I think you all know that if you're following the news, back a few years ago, Senator Harry Reid from Nevada, who's the majority leader of the Senate, was working on this issue. He has been mentoring Senator Rubio and also works with some other senators very interested in this issue. They authorized, from the Pentagon budget, $22 million to do a study. Now, this is in the New York Times and CNN on the UFO issue. And I had the opportunity a few months ago to speak to the general who actually arranged and set all that up, who had retired from the Pentagon and was a staffer for Senator Reid and a friend of Senator Reid's. And in this couple-hour Zoom call meeting we had, because it was in the height of COVID a few months ago, he told me that they authorized this thinking they were going to get a legitimate study from Bigelow Aerospace out of Nevada. Now, I've known Mr. Bigelow since I met him at the Rockefeller Ranch in 1993. And he immediately, it was clear to me from what he told me, that he intended to get into the inside of the technology and knowledge, and he'd probably do anything to do so. I've met a few billionaires and centimillionaires who have done this, because what they don't need the money, they want the access, they want the knowledge. So his consigliere and the people around him who were his mentor for him forming Bigelow Aerospace, and before that, the National Institute of Discovery Science, were all counterintelligence operations from these unacknowledged special access projects. I knew them, I knew every one of them. And I knew he was going to be used by them for his money and his connections and his political connections to run what's called a DDT operation. You think of DDT as a pesticide or whatever. The right-hand guy for the director of the National Security Agency back some years ago, who was General Odom, his assistant used to carry his briefcase, handcuffed, you know, that whole bit. And I was meeting with him, and he says, "Oh yeah, we call these DDT operations." I said, "What is that? You're poisoning people?" He said, No. You set up a decoy operation, it becomes a distraction, and it trashes people's money or their understanding or their influence, and diverts. So it's a diversion. It is in and of itself a counterintelligence false flag strategy. And that, my friends, is what happened to our $22 million. Your money, my money. I've never gotten an Indian head nickel from the US government, but I sure have, or contractor or anyone, I sure have paid a lot. And that money went right into this operation, which was designed to get a report back to Congress. And this is what General Herbert said. It came back. We had a classified briefing in the SCIF, the Secure Communication Information Facility. That's what it is. I'm going to use SCIF in the future in my presentation in the Senate. But he said there was nothing that substantive there. It was a view from 40,000 feet. He was an Army pilot, this General Herbert. I said, yes, of course. He said, what do you mean, of course? I said, well, let me explain to you what the DDT operation was that was run on you. And I explained to him what I just said to you, and he went, oh my God, I wish we'd known you then, because we just wasted $22 million. I said, is that why you didn't renew the grant to Bigelow Aerospace? Because you felt and sensed that you were actually being deceived and it was a waste of money? He says, yes, we knew we weren't getting the story. He told me that point blank. Now we have this Director of National Intelligence report coming out. And what kind of dog and pony show that'll be, who knows? Likely in the classified SCIF for Congress, they will present some cases that will all be couched like they did for President Reagan and others, and President Trump and Vice President Pence. that it's a national security threat, that it's an alien threat. We need more money for the defense contractors, and we need to have more assets to put weapons in space to protect us from the aliens. That's the game that's being played right now, today, and that's why we have to act.